It's April 4th, and it's a Love What You Do again for those of us that are live and in person or on Zoom. How fun is that? And for those that will be listening in after the fact, we are talking about visual scoreboards and what you might have come up with a scoreboard. And as you know, we start off the Q&A with a couple of visuals of our own to dive in and give you some thoughts and some things to think about before we open it up to questions. So the first visual Ms. Haley is prepared for us is from a very valuable book called EOS Traction. It's actually called The Expanded Guided Version of Traction by Gino Wickman. Lots of major companies are familiar with this book, and they call a concept called the company scorecard. This is an example of one scoreboard that could be created, or scorecard could be created. Everybody's got different visuals of what scoreboards they choose, what scorecards they choose, how they want to document, how they want to determine what they're going to track. The value of this particular visual is they're being purposeful about what their revenue is and paying attention to this. We had a big conversation about this, and we started the year talking about our bottom line revenue. Ironically, we've got a bottom line lawyer here too. Isn't that fun?
Perfect.
That's perfect. And we started our whole conversation this last quarter as we getting ready to dive into second quarter about what's our cash balance and what does a cash flow document look like? And there's some tools for that. How are we being purposeful in our sales call? How are we being purposeful in our meetings? How are we being purposeful in our proposals? Have we secured a proposal? Have we closed that business? Are we working on our payroll? Are there problems? Are there any customer ratings? There's a term called EPS and NPS. EPS is an employee survey process. NPS is a client, how they will, it's called a net promoter score. And that tells us if one of the ways you could hear it said is on a scale of 1 to 10, if I asked you what score you would give our company, what number would you give it? If a client says an 8 or a 9, say, great, thank you for that. And what would cause you to move it to a 9 or a 10? That's one question you could ask, or you could do this in a survey format. And then the other person is, who would you refer us to? And if they don't have a name, that score may not be accurate, just a heads up. So just an awareness, and that's a whole nother conversation we could have. And then obviously, is there any receivables or any payables that need to be addressed in these numbers? And now you notice on the scoreboard is more for a checkbox concept than an actual numbers or details. So you can use whatever system you want to use. It is a sample. So pretty simple visual. Everybody gets to choose what kind of system they want to use. We decided on a little bit different of a visual. And so Haley, are you ready to share that?
Yes, let me stop this real quick and then I will hop on over to the other one.
And Haley is the master of these amazing visuals. So we started the concept of this year of the fact that we are in the driver's seat. We get to make the choices. So we officially April 1st, we are opening up our new corporation. So technically we are a year by year company, yet we are setting up new books for April. And so we are setting it up as of April, literally next Friday, we're doing our team first pit stop meeting. And it's going to be a quarter review of what we've done in the 3 major groups that we've committed to as a company. So our 3 major groups are Leadership Academy, and that I have a partnership with, and we are actually getting ready to expand it to multiple other resources. And we have that in New York with an association. We have the Masters League competition. Everybody in the room is actually graduates of our Masters League competition. And then we do that once a quarter. And then we have a brand new mastermind experience we're launching. The particular one we're launching, we literally just launched this last Thursday. It's called our Living Unlayered Group Mastermind Experience. And we're getting prepared to set up that format to be able to do multiple types of mastermind experiences and multiple different ways. And our goal will be to have them at once a quarter in the future. Right now, they're going to be twice a year as we get the systems and structures in place. Then we have the ability to add in the numbers. We have the ability to add in our value system, our mission statement, et cetera, is on the bottom. We can add any types of visual. If you notice, Haley's already started adding some other visuals into there as we refine this visual for our team. So we can be clear about what numbers we're at, what numbers we had as our goal, what numbers we had as our actual. And this is something we are literally revising every day. Yet it will be an ultimate document that we will operate on a yearly basis moving forward. You should see all the fun looks and curiosities in this. Haley, how much fun was this to create? And will you share the story of your son as you were building this?
Yeah. Let me see so I can see you guys actually. I think that's better. Okay. So I love any chance to exercise that creative muscle, I think. So this is, creating this visual was fun for me, but I started on a big whiteboard and I just, had the racetrack drawn out and I started putting the calendar months on it. And my son comes up to me and he's like, "What are you drawing?" And he's 5. And I said, "I'm drawing a racetrack." And he's all, "You get to draw a racetrack for work? That's so cool." And so he got his own whiteboard and he was like drawing people in the stands and he was convinced that his racetrack was much better than mine. And he's probably right about that. But it was really fun.
And Haley, one other thing for the team, that how valuable was this visual for us to work through and create that and put numbers to, and how valuable was it for you and what we shared with our team?
Very, very valuable. I think when you just look at what we're showing right now, there are a couple elements that are missing on the finished document. Like if you look, the Masters League competition, Leadership Academy, all of these different little areas, there's room in there. And what you can actually do as a team is say, okay, for this Leadership Academy, we anticipate having this many participants at this cost each, which would allow us to reach this amount for, if we reach that goal. And what that does, it's hugely valuable because it allows your team to see, okay, these are the mile markers that we will reach as a team if we can accomplish all of these things. It makes it really realistic and doable because you see it, one little step at a time, and you can see it broken down to the individual and how each individual makes a difference. And then your team can see that there is a plan, that you're not just aimlessly wandering through the wilderness. And they feel like they have a real part in it. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use this. You can see our mission statements on there. You can see when they should be anticipating a pit stop. So there really is a lot of opportunity for information to be shared here.
And we're literally just refining it. And as of last quarter, we only had 1 Leadership Academy. And by the first quarter, we will have 2. By second quarter, we should be up. By third quarter, we should be up to 3 each quarter, as everything is planning out. And it gives us additional revenue, additional things. That's just one. And what different things that we're building from there. Any questions on the visuals?
I have one question / comment. I like it. It's very interesting and I can see where I can use it. Intuitively, it's going backwards. So if you look at Indy 500, Indy 500 would start down where our mission is to guide where that is, and it would go counterclockwise.
Interesting.
Yeah. So for whatever that's worth, I just thought I'd pass it on because I was looking at this. Wait a minute, why does February come after March? It's because you're looking the wrong direction.
That's interesting. So we'll need to check
Got
the accuracy of that, because I don't know if NASCAR operates on the same way too. I assume it'd be going the other way, huh?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, we were going clockwise and it may be the opposite.
Yeah.
Yep. Whatever it is, I can change it, but thank you.
How fun. I appreciate that. And overall, it is built to be a more simple visual to narrow it in. This doesn't include other business features. This is what we are moving towards to own our 3 major programs, the 3 services, and narrowing our focus.
At each pit stop, would there be like a goal that there's X amount of enrollments in Leadership Academy and X number of Masters League competition participants, like that? Okay.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the retreat groups. So like the retreat that is this fall,
Mm-hmm.
what is that called?
Living Unlayered Mastermind Experience.
Okay, so it's not on this.
Yes, we specifically put the mastermind experience because we're able to do multiple types of mastermind experiences. We have the Living Unlayered is our first test project for these type of mastermind experiences.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So we can do multiple mastermind. We're building the platform and live because we added in a program called Axiogenics, which is being integrated into the book, which is why it's called the Living on Layers. So we added 2 materials. So we could do just a self-leadership program. We could do just a Master's League competition. We could do a corporation mastermind experience. We could do any type of mastermind experience, but that is set up with that format.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and that way it doesn't, the reason we did it in that simple of a language is we wanted to make sure not to confuse our clients, because we do such customization, that we didn't want to confuse our team with the options of what they want to be focused on. These are our 3 overarching groups. These are our 3 highest priorities. We have other options, but these are the 3 that we are putting at the top of our focus.
Okay. And Steve, I apologize. I'm asking probably more detailed questions than I normally would, but I'm trying to understand it also from a legal perspective. So.
No, it's perfect. I appreciate it.
I love your questions, Richard. And this is part of the journey that, one of the things I had a conversation with somebody earlier today is when you're preparing your company to scale, you think in a whole new mindset. You think in a whole different perspective of how to document, how to make sure it aligns, how it communicates, there's just so many pieces to that puzzle that and it's a way more detailed and way more comprehensive than you realize when you start it.
Yeah. And then
go ahead.
so many details that are inherent in each of those things that when you stop and think about it, I don't know about you, but it makes my head hurt sometimes.
Well, and Richard, the thing that a thought pattern that I know I'll be transparent with, as well as others, is that it's very time consuming, very in some ways monotonous and required. Yet I said to somebody, there are some amazing people that didn't have the wealth of knowledge that some of us do, that have made outrageously large companies, because they were willing to do the monotonous. They were willing to get everything out of their head, get it documented, get it prepared. And even those of us that may have, as Haley and I were talking about today, I've got a multitude of toolboxes, and yet that could be almost too many toolboxes if I confuse people with it.
Yeah.
And then you can spend too many years getting caught up in the monotony that's not focused and disciplined and clearly shared and messaged to align with the audience you're looking to align with, to build what you're looking to build.
And I can't articulate it just yet. I'm still thinking about it, but it seems to me that this actually integrates nicely with the Habit Finder.
Very much so.
There are points in the Habit Finder that would relate specifically to this diagram.
Yeah, and so we call them mile markers in here. The Habit Finder calls them millimeters. And so, and it's very much about, and one of our other programs, which is a deeper program of the Habit Finder, is called Axiogenics, which is a self-leadership program. And that goes into the mindfulness of how we use our asset, not our biases, which is a whole nother conversation, and not to confuse the matter. Yet, because it's so easy to live and reactive and spend way too long there, which is 85% of the time. So we need to be purposeful and mindful more often than not to be able to develop and own and deliver and communicate all this messaging, which is called structure, which is also part of the Habit Finder. So I love that you're connecting the dots, literally. Yeah, Haley's going to add a car at some point in time when we've got all the final details. When it's going in the right direction.
A Porsche 911, if you've got a choice there.
I'm writing it down. That would be my son's choice, I think, too. So
good to know. Steve, any other questions on the visual before we take that down?
Turbo Carrera.
There you go.
That would be the Porsche. Yes, I've seen
there
it.
with you.
And see, I just noticed the pretty little Corvettes, the Stingrays that are driving around. That would be the one that I would be putting into. Or a really fun big Jeep. But anyways. So educate us. Steve, any other questions before we open it up for questions?
No.
All right, Haley. Anything else you want to share on these details?
No.
So Steve and Richard.
Porsche Carrera.
Oh, you seriously have it. Love it. So we just need the picture of it, Haley, and we'll put it on the.
I got you.
Love it. We love to incorporate our community into our future. I love that. That's really exciting. So what questions do you have for our Q&A today? Or are you prepared for questions?
Well, I have one
Mhm.
that I'm personally struggling with a little bit, and that is it's great to have a scorecard. And if the scorecard takes more work than the work, then is it really serving its purpose? And really the question is, how do you scale the scorecard for a small organization, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people? Scorecard is one thing. For a larger organization, it's something very different. And it's because when you have more people, for lack of a better word, you have a little bit more slack in the time available to do administrative or metric work, right? And for a small organization, it's like, okay, there are X number of hours in the day. And so how much time am I willing to spend on either creating or tracking metrics? Not saying they're not important, they're very important, but how do we, you know, apportion that time? And at least in my experience, and maybe it's because there's just a smidge of perfectionist in me, that every time I undertake to do something like that, it takes way longer than I thought it would take, right?
Agreed.
And you also find, at least in my case, I'm finding I got to go back and clean up some old stuff, because the organization, for me, organization's been around a long time. So how do I go back and clean up those old things, or do I actually just declare, okay, everything before this is no longer relevant, you know, although I might learn from it, it's no longer relevant in terms of measuring it. So anyway, that's kind of just where my head's at. And when you showed that scorecard, I'm thinking, oh my God, there's so much work to be done there, you know.
Well, then you add to that, you know, trying to scale like you're talking about, or make, you know, significant changes in your company platform and direction and everything else. It's almost like having pieces on a game board, that when you do that, you know, you shake it and stuff. Some pieces fly off and then they're all over the place, and some just need a little adjustment. But I mean, it is, you know, I have to do so much tweaking on stuff that I never thought would change, or I knew would change, but not that much. You know, I made an adjustment to the direction of the company and the focus on the business model that is perfect. It's what I've been talking about doing for many years, but man, it's been an adjustment, and I'm just still trying to grab the wheel, you know, after the thing fishtailed, you know. So it's coming along, but definitely piggybacking on what Richard said, there's a lot to adjust in there, and it's how much do how much time do you spend working on your company, and how much do you spend working in your company? You know, it is a delicate balance, and you can see that when you focus too much on one, the other one suffers.
Yeah, isn't that the rich dad, poor dad view of things? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and it comes back to both of you. Steve, the fishtail was a great visual of, oh gosh, felt that one before, right? And the game board, and I immediately had Parcheesi in my head, how Parcheesi came as the visual of all the dice and the little pawns disappear all over, right? And the gift is, Richard, you talked about a concept of a small to a large company. Technically, if we were following systems and structures, you know, because that would be the concept of building a business the way it needs to be built from the beginning. And, you know, most visionaries, if you go to the E-Myth Mastery or E-Myth Revisited, most operate with one person for years, attempting to hold all the different department roles that are required in a business, and then wonder why when somebody comes to clean up with them, and then you add one person or two persons or three persons, and you work to develop a department for each of those people that has no manual, no system, no structure. and no boundaries or no alignment or clarity of what that is, then they're frustrated because they don't have a document. And then you're having to spend extra time to do that. And then you've got a domino of situations. So Steve, when you said you changed the whole company, if I remember right, you went years ago and had all that documented. And then now all that gets to be revisited again, right?
And a lot of it is, I mean, part of it is the managed services part of it. I was doing that years ago using coupons.
Wow.
And this is just another implementation of that, you know, but I mean, I scaled the company down, and after I, you know, was scaling it up, I scaled it back down, and now I'm kind of adjusting back up a little bit. But yeah, you're right. I mean, a lot of those systems are stuff that I did give to employees and administrators and things like that. And you know, every time I did a system, I did something I knew I was going to do more than once. I created a system for it, and I did a great job of that, and a great job of delegating that stuff. What I did extremely poorly was taking those responsibilities back over again as I downsized.
That's such a powerful statement, Steve. Letting go of something and not taking it back is a opportunity of what we call delegation. And I actually sometimes use I actually have a little pool toy, but the other one we have here is that fun little, toy that we use. And when you have a team and you put the team together, if one person takes their hand off, this won't light up because the team needs to operate together. And yet if the team is working all together, it will provide the energy, the flow, the exercise, etc., the gift of making systems work effectively. The challenge is none of us, there is a good amount of us that doesn't slow down long enough to create, as you said, Steve, the minute I knew something was going to need to be done more than once, there needed to be a system for it.
Mm-hmm.
And there needs to be a time and a moment that that system is developed, and there's time made for that system to be developed. So it is overall effective and efficient to the whole team, or to the member that is supposed to hold that role, and a backup person in case that person's unavailable, on vacation, whatever it may be. So that's ideally the way the business is. And so if you read the traction book, they talk about the scorecard should be across the board on your values. And do you have the capacity to do it? Do you want it? And do you get it? Those are the three major focuses. Is the team member being scored on the things they're being scored on because they get it, they want it, and they have the capacity to do it, and they align with your values to do it? That's ideally what the scoreboard's set up to be around. If they're the sales role, they're going to have those other items that are attached to those sales items. Ideally, Richard, as the owner, at some point in time, your job is just to be reviewing the scorecards, not creating the scorecards. Yet at this point, if there are not scorecards in place for certain people, there's no way to review a scorecard unless they're developed. Therefore, you're muted, sir. You're muted.
The gardener's here, so I muted myself.
Ah,
They're out there making all kinds of noise. It seems like some of those measurements or metrics are objective and some of them are subjective. And so it seems like the ones that are objective, perhaps you could delegate that. All right, count how many of X are there. And the ones that are subjective are need owner input, let's put it that way.
and Haley, you have a thought? I do.
I was just taking a look at that scorecard again. Which ones, Richard, were you thinking were subjective?
I'd actually have to look at it again to tell you that. But what April is just referencing is, have they bought in? Are the values in alignment? That's a subjective measurement. There's in my mind, there's not a way to objectively measure that. And I think some of those, the subjective ones, are more important than the objective ones because they're subjective.
Well, it's so hard because your perspective is so different than the perspective of the subject you're talking about relating to the scorecard, I mean, and their ideas about what they want to get out of the company and what their future holds are sometimes not totally in line with yours. And you may or may not know that. Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah.
Well, and that goes back to our whole conversation of intrinsic validation. Have we gained it? Is there a moment of decision and is there gained agreement? Because ideally the scorecard is something they've bought into before they've even been scored. And so each team member, including the owner and the founder or whoever serving in whatever role, ideally is bought into a visual document or something that is documented, whether it be whatever type of scoreboard you want to buy into, that everybody's in alignment with. So as a visionary, as the founder, as the head of the head leader, your job is to give an overarching view, an overarching visual. And then each person ideally has their own separate scorecard in alignment with the things everybody's came to agreement in. So Haley, if you'll pull up that scorecard for just a second again.
So
The one from the book.
Yes, please. Mhm.
The
Go ahead,
objective portions. Let's see if I can articulate this. The objective portions of the scorecard are more easily, they can be kind of routine. The subjective parts are almost more like a review.
Correct. This is more of a objective one. So you notice on here, there's no values, there's no get it, want it capacity. There's another document called the people tracker, and that one is aligned with that subjective measure. This one is based on, did we review it, and everybody has a number. So ideally, a objective for a salesperson has a specific number. Did they meet the number? Did they not? Check not, or plus or minus is another way they do this document. And then you see by how they scored on whether or not they're in alignment. So we had a tracking tool, Steve was exposed to it a while back ago, that would record, and you just put in numbers every week if you did the part. And it was that simple to say, did I do the proactive objective agreement that I agreed on with no subjective other than the number? And you get to decide who gets this to be defined as a number. So like the concept of how many advocates did I touch? Well, you get to define who the advocate is. We just agreed that you're going to have a specific number for how many people you touch. That's a subjective objective you're talking about?
Yes.
So it's a matter as a team defining, and every team has a different way of defining these specific tools. This is just a sample of one.
Mm-hmm.
This is an opportunity for you to contemplate. And Richard, you have a document that you're starting. And as you're talking about that concept is how do we want to, who does what, how do we define it? How often do we visit it, etc. Those are things you get to define as you build and scale to what you want to build and scale to. That makes sense?
Yeah.
I hope I answered the question.
I think so. Yep.
Awesome. Richard, Steve?
I'm good.
You're like, yeah, I got that one. So I want to go back to a couple of things you said in regards to, and you can take that down, Haley, thank you. How many roles do you think need to be scoreboarded for a company?
I think it depends on the company.
So Steve, how many hats do you wear in your company?
Got to be 3,000 or 4,000.
I was waiting for the
Is that all?
initial number.
Real piker, huh?
And when's the last time you documented all the immense amount of hats you wear?
You know, I haven't documented that in many years.
And so if you were, Richard, what about you? What do you think, how many hats?
I think of it by departments, as it were. And so for me, that would be like 6. So there's finance, there's management, there's business development, there's intellectual property, there's operations, all those areas. Then IT. Oh my God, IT. Yeah.
That's a whole nother category, right? Yeah. And Haley, how many departments in one line ahead?
Well, right now or in 5 years?
In 5 years, yeah. I love it. I love the way you're thinking.
I would be kind of in line with Richard on that.
The 6? Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. And Richard, have you found value in delegating departments?
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So sometimes, Steve, one of the opportunities is to determine, you may not have to hire somebody, but you could find a consultant and or a vendor to be your resource for that department until you want to bring somebody into the company or corporation.
Well, no question. It's a struggle. I've met with success and challenges in doing that over the years in several different departments. For example, when my full-time administrator moved to Idaho, I took over those responsibilities, including QuickBooks and management of the company financials and stuff like that. And I did contract that out. And I'd bring somebody in, go through training. 3 months later, 6 months later, 2 months later, they would leave.
And they're done that.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, and it's not anything that was bad. It's just, one decided that her parents offered her a job with the company. Another one moved out of state. It's just was frustrating to invest that kind of time in, and sometimes it was fine. Other times, I look at the QuickBooks and, oh my gosh, I have to go back 3 months and start again. It's a freaking mess, and I had the same thing happen recently. I'm trying to scale up and I can't really afford full-time employees at this stage. You have to build production based on the fact that you have the resources to support that increase in production. So I'm hiring consultants, bridging the gap between full-time staff and grooming them to be full-time staff. And I've had two of them, one of them was brand new, not a huge loss, but still, a little frustrating. He moved to San Diego. The other gentleman who I love this guy. He's perfect. I was grooming him to take over the company someday or the territory. And he got a full-time job, and it's hard because I knew it was coming, and it's, it takes time. You can't go from, 100 clients to 1,000 clients instantly. It takes time to put my sales hat on and go grab a customer that I know I'm going to need help to be able to successfully maintain. And so it's been a struggle, and expected, but how I don't know how to manage that. You can't, I've been down the road where I did that, and I was given the guy work I should have been doing because I saw that he was going to be valuable down the road. So, and I say I starved while he, didn't, but I mean, it wasn't that bad, but definitely giving him work I should have been doing. And part of it was communication issues. I didn't, I asked, but I didn't make it clear through documentation that he needed to grow that territory himself. So he wasn't going out there and doing that because he was comfortable with what income level he was making. And that turned out to be a struggle. So, finding that balance to get somebody that they can transition away from whatever their income source is to being my employee / contractor with an income source that's commensurate and room to grow and opportunity and everything else that keeps employees happy and productive and staying with you for the long run to get them to a level that benefits you both. It's been a real struggle for me. So, and just recently even, I had a great follow-up conversation, that hopefully I can regain that resource in the fall. I kind of laid out the cards a little bit with him and said, this is really what my hopes are for you, and communication is another key, but it's also, it's a two-edged sword too, how much do you disclose? I don't know. It's been tough, but in any case, that's what I'm dealing with now, and I've dealt with in the past during that process of scaling. It's been a struggle.
Steve, quite a few things you said there, and I'm sure.
For sure.
Oh my gosh. So, and Richard was shaking his head the whole time. So I'm sure I'm going to go half of what Richard was already thinking. Yet, communication is the number one first, right? As you know, through the Habit Finder material, one of the worst things we have in the Habit Finder material that talks about is what we call unmet expectations.
Right.
And that can be on both parties, right? Anytime intrinsic validation is all about gaining agreement, being able, and so the other part we use is the concept of valuegenic leadership. Am I creating a valuegenic relationship that says I'm going to focus on what you need as well as what I need so that we both get net value?
Yeah, that's the goal for sure.
And so the opportunity, as you were talking, is when, and we're literally in this process as well, is our onboarding process needed to be totally revamped because our onboarding process was not aligning and making sure we were following the procedures and the process and the details appropriately and putting everything in place to honor not only the people coming on, so they had clarity and they knew which seat to take in the plane. We're not using a bus, we're using a plane. So anyone that's read Good to Great is about the bus and which seat they have on the bus, right? We've decided we've got the plane. And as Haley talked about, sometimes I'll add things to her plane and she doesn't even know that I added another, whole quadrant to it. Yet, see, one of the things you're talking about is for your vendors, for your team members, for anyone, your clients, there's an onboarding process. And if we don't slow down long enough to create a very systematic onboarding process, as well as a retention process, as well as a clarification of each other's accountability, and that's for our clients as well. If we don't help our clients, and I've had some major conversations about this, a lot of companies have what they call a scope of work. And in that scope of work, they clarify, this is what you can expect, and this is what is. And anytime that scope of work changes, we need to have a new conversation. And that's applicable to your business. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, no question. And I have tried to mitigate that loss as much as possible by bridging the gap with sharing that resource with other companies like mine. So there was economy of scale on their part and mine, so they got enough production to hopefully bridge the gap, but they know they're working with a company that does care about that. That's a dangerous game too, because then you're sharing a resource that other people see as valuable. And, I've had them steal those resources in the past. So, how much do you share? You want to keep the guy productive, but the more you farm them out to other companies, the bigger chance there is that they're going to be snatched up, and all you can do, you want to hope for the best for them, but, you also want to show them that, that down the road, there's opportunity with this company that's going to be better than opportunity with the other ones. But it's a fine line. I like to over deliver and under promise, so, if it takes me 10 new medium-sized companies to be able to keep this resource busy long enough, or busy enough to keep them sticking around. It takes months to set those relationships up and gain those customers and then it takes, wins as far as customer contact to keep the customer around. So, it's not a process that happens quickly enough, to be able to get the feedback quickly enough to know that you're on the right track. I don't know.
So Steve, I have quite a few thoughts, but I'm going to let Richard chime in for a minute, and then I'm going to add a couple of thoughts.
Well, Steve, I think you unearthed one of the fundamental challenges of owning a company, and that is no matter who you bring in, they're not as dedicated as you are, not
Right.
over the long haul. They may be today, maybe for a while. And so part is how do you incent people to act in the best interest of the company? Obviously, share ownership is one of them for corporations. Bonus is something else you can do, but bonuses are short-lived and can lead to people mismanaging that. So for me, was the recognition of no one else is going to be as dedicated as I am. Just simply not going to happen. That's number one. Number two is especially for a business that's been around a long time. No one else knows where all the bodies are buried. They don't know all the history. They don't know everything that you've been through. They haven't learned the lessons you've learned. And so there's a trade-off between letting them learn the lesson and also having to relive the lesson, right? And so, yeah, I don't know about you, but I engage sometimes the folks who think they know more than they know. And at the same time, I want to recognize that they know things that I don't know.
Sure.
And how do we, match those things up that works to both? And you said it, it's communication. Not been my forte, but working on it.
Day
So
by day, Richard, day by day.
day by day. So I mean, but the fundamental truth that you unearth is not everybody has they don't have the same priorities that you have. They don't have the same dedication that you have. And it's not reasonable to expect them to, unless you put them in a position where they have an investment also.
Yeah, I mean, do we do that right from the get-go, or do we kind of feel them out to see if they're going to be that resource that's a good fit for that? Because not all of them are. I mean, there's only been of the 15 different people I can think of off the top of my head, there's only been 2 that I would even put in that category.
So Steve, there's one definition I was introduced to. There's 2 types of talent. There is capacity talent that is excellent at their particular role. And then there is technically it's called cul-de-sac talent. And they own their role. They're excellent at that role. And as long as you are meeting their needs, whatever that need is, sometimes it's money, sometimes it's acknowledgement, sometimes it's community. One of the research they found is if somebody has at least 6 to 8 people in the company they're friends with, they'll stay because they've got a community that they're invested in. That's for bigger companies, right?
Yeah, I got you.
But there is another role called the capacity talent. I'm paraphrasing it. And they are the people that can take on a multitude of roles. They see, like Haley just said, 5 years from now, this is where we'll be. And we have those conversations because that's things we want to create and build together. Yet I tell Haley all the time, I don't say anything. I waited 10 years for her to be on my team and I'm ecstatic. And so, it's finding that right fit that we built a level of trust through experiences, but we also serve and allow each other to operate how we best operate. And then we complement each other in the areas that we need help in. And we honor that with each other. And we're not afraid to have that conversation. Those are the journeys that have been a growth process, right? It wasn't something that happened overnight because it was different of me being her coach than being her boss. And she reminds me all the time, you are my boss. Yes, thank you. And because I believe in partnership and I operate, and that's one of the things that I think our team does grow in, but people will go their own ways. I've probably been through at least 10, 15 people as well. And through that journey, I've learned some things I've done wrong. I've learned some things that we still have systems and structures for. We can tweak now and we can go back and pull from our document library and make it more current and more relevant. Yet, Steve, there's 2 things that I would love to, for both of you. I'm going to go back to Richard's question. You said, when do you decide how far back to clean up? You clean up what's right now immediate that you immediately can address so that you don't, our advocates need to be communicated with at all times, right? And then you work on, and then the other aspect, Steve, there's 2 things you love is the narrative of the 1-4-5 and the concept of the ability to know what's on your schedule. And all those hats you have, they need to be on your schedule in order to honor the finance time or honor the building time, the business development time, all the different things I even have breathe on my schedule because I had to put it on there to remind myself to breathe. And more often than not, that breathe time gets thrown out the door because I'm still building that muscle memory to say that's ridiculously important. And sometimes the breathe is to say, okay, what needs to be addressed that I can address today at this moment. You get to decide, and you get to put that on your schedule because we know if it's not on our schedule, it's not going to happen more often than not. That makes sense? So our opportunity and our schedule, if you reviewed your last week's schedule, what got documented on your schedule, what actually got done, you'll get to see some of that awareness as part of a scoreboard. That is a system and a structure that will help move us forward and move the needle. Does that make sense?
So
Would you
one
be-
other,
Go
one
ahead.
other thing I want to add to what Steve said, because and I'd like to have an ongoing dialogue with Steve about this, because one of the things that you said is true in my experience as well. And so that is the frustration of getting somebody trained up and having them leave. And so I'm doing the same thing that you're doing, seeing how many of those things can I move to another company. And so because then that gives me a whole lot more consistency. There's obviously a downside to that. You know, an employee in your office can do a variety of things, whereas the company you retain is going to do X, right? But I do think that as I move forward in my practice, that's what I'm going to do, is those things which I can delegate to another company that is invested in their own success and survival and persistence, I will. And that's what you said you're doing. And so I'm certainly open to having ongoing conversation about how that process is working for you.
Yeah, me too. I appreciate that.
But, and ironically, we can continue the conversation. We are going to be reintroducing, both of you remember the obligation cycle. We're going to be reintroducing that next week and helping you reframe your thought process of not feeling like you have to do systems and structure, moving you into a mindset and helping you get set up for what it looks like to own the time, commitment, and joy into deciding what's on your day-to-day scoreboard, if you will. Is there any other questions?
A million, but
Right?
nothing that won't wait a little while, you know.
Well, and thank you both for being consistent and part of our community. It helps add value to others as well. It helps value to help us stay in alignment of what's next, because at this point, it's getting that thought patterns of how we own, how we're going to create, complete, and celebrate, and move on to the next mile marker. Does that make sense?
Yep.
It does. I appreciate everybody's input.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you all.
Same here. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Oh,
Y'all
Haley,
too.
Bye-bye.
Before you guys go, I just couldn't help. I don't know if you've heard our podcast that just came out this last week. It's so insanely aligned with this conversation that we're having. It was actually the founder of Predictive ROI, which is our podcast team that we've been working with, and him and April had a conversation about being transparent with your team. They call it their Everest mission, and just about, you know, this is what sets apart being a visionary between just being a professional in your field. There are certain roles that you play as the visionary of your company, certain opportunities that you have to set the people underneath you up for success.
Mhm.
And he has a lengthy and great conversation around that whole dynamic. So it's on our website if you wanted to go take a look at it, or I can email it to you guys and listen to it on your way home or whatever. But I just thought it was pretty crazy how aligned it was.
I would,
If
I
you
would
would
love you
email,
to
I'd
send
love
me a
it.
link.
Yes,
Yeah,
I will send it
please.
to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Haley. Great observation.
Yeah.
Always appreciate y'all. Have an amazing week and great wrap up. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.